Well, let's talk about the old programming.
Yeah. Okay. So here's a lovely example. I know you know this one because we talked about it before the show, but I want to ask everybody out there, what color is a yield sign in the United States? What's the first thing that you think of? I wish we had a way to do comments or people could dive in here, but what color is it for you, Sara?
Yellow.
Yellow. So that's the first one that you came up with. And so most people do see yellow and black. 90% of my audiences to 95 will say that. A yield sign in 1971 was changed to red and white. Since 1971, it has been completely changed by 1974, and they have all been red and white for years and years and years now. But the yellow and black yield sign is still in our collective consciousness. And I have people say, well, what about people who were born after 1974? Well, it gets reproduced all the time on billboards, on book covers, on T-shirts, the yellow and black yield sign, because that's what they think it is yellow and black, and they don't know the red and white. Even on Sesame Street in 2016, I saw the little yellow yield sign being bounced around by the guy who sang the snowman in Frozen. My 2-year-old son at the time saw the yellow and black yield sign, and it's now in his head with a
Oh
song,
my
which makes it
gosh.
even more, powerful. But the cool thing and the interesting thing is, well, it's not so cool actually. It's what's hurting us as a species on this planet. You can't just put more information into your brain and have it change. So even though, and I want you to talk about this, you knew, because you've done this before. Will you talk about your experience with the yield sign?
I listened to Zen talk about this twice. And the second time I heard it, I thought, oh, well, I know the answer to this. But my brain still said yellow.
Yes.
And it was like, wait a second, is that right? I was second guessing myself. And that stuff happens to me a lot where I think to myself, okay, I'm now questioning myself again, what's in my brain?
Uh-huh.
And it's just so powerful. Our brains are so computer like.
Yes.
And I know that 97% of our thoughts today are the same as yesterday, and we have to actively change them. And it's just like changing habits, it's changing our thinking, right? Our
Yes.
reprogramming of our brain.
This is what's so cool. I'm so glad you brought that up, the whole 97% of our thoughts. Even if I ask you this again in a year, your mind will say yellow and black. Most of our programming happens between the ages of 0 and 7 when we're children. Everything that we see our parents doing, how they treat each other, how they treat us, how they treat our brothers and sisters different, how they treat the waitress, or server at the restaurant, all of this is being encoded and becoming our beliefs and our programming. So even if I ask you this in a year, you will still say yellow and black. But if I gave you a box of crayons and I had you draw the red and white yield sign, you would remember it for the rest of your life, because information does putting new information into our minds does not update the programming. Your physical body updates it. And so this is what the cool thing is. When I first started, I did not know how to teach this because I went through trial and error in the 10 years that I used it before I got to people. So what happened was I figured out that I can't use people's brains to teach them how to use their internal guidance system. So the process is, when your internal guidance system closes, you know that there's a thought that's not working for you. Then you have a tiny practice which allows you to pivot. And when that opening happens, you actually start a new neural pathway. So it's as if I'm giving you that red crayon to draw your yellow, the red and white yield sign. You're actually updating the neural programs in your brain. So what I researched, I just discovered it. I didn't create it. Everybody's been born with it. We actually have been born with a system inside our body that will update the neural pathways of our brain. It will change the program to our present moment when we use it. Think about that for a second. What's possible of being able to get rid of the 0 to 7 programming in the world of addictions and divorce and marriages and parenting issues, that people that don't had bad parents and they don't know how to parent, or our capacity to dream bigger dreams and have an opening that we know that we're going to be able to accomplish this thing together, or as a company, or what you can do in your career when you feel that opening that you can get that position that you're so scared of asking for, or whatever it is, right? We were born with a system that can change our brains, and we have it with us every single day, and it's always on and it's always working. And once you do the training to understand how easy this is, your life changes dramatically and quickly, because you don't have 97% of the same thoughts that you did yesterday. You're in the moment of constantly creating new thoughts about your health, money, intimacy, everything. And so it's pretty fast and magical. In fact, I'd like to say magic and synchronicity become the norm, about how different your life becomes when you start paying attention to this and changing your neural pathways.
So you're saying if you're tapping into your internal guidance system on a moment-to-moment basis, we are constantly moment-to-moment changing the neural pathways in our body and brain.
When it goes from an opening or from a closed sensation to the opening, that's when the neural pathway is being created. And when you stay with that opening sensation, that's when it's being reinforced. And the old program starts to, they call it neural extinction. It begins to actually die. So here, I'll give you an example, like a real life example. I picked up from my mother that everybody was talking behind our backs. She had this thing, she got it from her mom. If neighbors were talking and we drove by, she would immediately go into this place of fear that was us they were talking about. Well, that's brutal. If you live your life thinking that, it's painful. A lot of our head noise is what causes our suffering. And so that happened to me. I had that all the time. Well, then when I started using this, I realized that closed me. So I was like, they're not talking about me, open. Right. And I kept staying with that. No, that's not what's happening. And I could feel it. And I started changing that neural pathway. Well, a couple of years later, you don't even notice. This is the big thing. It changes and you're on to the next thing. You don't even think about it. It's gone. It's like it evaporates, right? These problems that we have. I was teaching a class and I'd had like a kind of an issue with a student the day before. And I was walking through the kitchen of the retreat center and that student and another student were talking. And I got all the way into the room that we were teaching in. And it dawned on me that I had not had one thought that they were talking about me. Right? Not one, not anything. I mean, it was like, it just all of a sudden hit me. Like, I don't have that issue anymore. And so a lot of the students that work with Smart Soul Academy and they're doing these practices, what happens is these long-term things that they never thought they could get rid of. That's just who they are. It's their personality. They begin to go away. And this authentic new being starts coming through of that. When you get rid of all that other stuff that people gave you, you start coming through. I think it's the number one thing that most people say and doing the work is I really feel like me now. I actually feel like myself because there's not all this head noise, this hijacking mental chatter that doesn't really belong to them at all. And there's a peace that happens. And over time, you just stay in the opening. Most of the time you live in this open experience and occasionally you'll feel this closing and then you fix it, shift, start the new neural pathway and on you go.
I just love this. You know, a lot of my clients will claim that they're addicted to food or they can't get out of their own way to start exercising. And we are just a series of habits that go in and out and in and out. And we let the reptilian brain kind of take us through our day in a very monotonous, non-thinking way. And the fact that you are giving people this power to make these changes is amazing because that's what people are just dying to have, to take their power back. And they feel, you know, when we're all under this fear and stress of what's going on, maybe globally, it's hard to stay in your power and to tap into this guidance system or your intuition. Even more so, right? It's just survival. We're just trying to put one foot in front of the other.
Well, the other thing I'm finding, like workshops and seminars and even coaching and books, we're just dumping more information in, but it's not creating the transformation. Lots of things that we have in our mind are like the yellow yield sign. So for instance, I'll give you a quick example. I had a student at the academy who she thought she had an eating disorder and had been spending years trying to get rid of this overeating, binging disorder that she believed she had. Well, when she was closed, one of the things is when we're on these live coaching calls, these group coaching calls, I can feel when people close. I'm like, I said, does that open you? And she stopped and she says, go ahead, say it again. I have an eating disorder. And she goes, no, I'm closed. I said, then that means it's not true. And she said, I just want you to hold the thought that maybe you don't have an eating disorder. And she was like, she goes, I just opened, but my mother is the one who told me that I had this eating disorder. I said, well, tell me about your life. And she goes, well, I get up around 11 o'clock in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I work nights. And then what was happening is she was going through her day, starting at 11, having dinner at 10, and then beating herself up because she was eating so late because you're supposed to stop eating at 6. Well, not if you're getting home at 4 o'clock in the morning from work. You know, that's her dinner. That was like her big dinner time. Her lunchtime was 10 to 11 o'clock. She shifted her habits by following her IGS and completely left her within about a week. The whole
Wow.
thing that she had been working on for over 18 years, I got chills, disappeared because she was working on the wrong thing. And we do it all the time. We have so many things about ourselves that we think are broken or wrong, and they're not. They're false. They're old programming. It's not true. So
I
this
love
becomes
that.
such a relief when you start really getting to know who you are, and you've got this system that's calling up your yellow yield signs and showing you how to shift them. It's profound, the change.